Hi, good evening, or good morning, or wherever you are. Afternoon. This is part 8 of Lucy Letby, A Different Story. I'm not going to do the notes. I probably overdid it a bit with the last one, with the swearing and everything. Perhaps none of that's necessary, but sort of moods and feelings can change from day to day, can't they? And this one is part 8, Lucy Letby, A Different Story. The media, when I say the media, mainstream media, I suppose. And but not just that, really. And public opinion, and they're interlinked, aren't they? Because a lot of a public opinion is, I know it's a general term, it follows what people read and hear in the media and see. I haven't got anything. It's all quite simple, really, isn't it? It's a stock thing to do for the mainstream media for all they compete with each other to do it, to get eyeballs or ears listening, and they need to create a figure. They need to create a monster. They need to create someone to hate, someone to fear, someone to kind of get excited over. So they create a figure that's nothing to do with the person they're talking about. In this case, I mean, perhaps in some other cases they're nearer the truth. But in this case, it's the antithesis, I think, of the person that they're talking about. It's so divorced. The public image of Lucy Letby is so divorced from the reality. And I'm not saying that because, well, I haven't met her, but I'm speaking out of intuition. I'm speaking out of listening to her friends speak. Speaking out of the feeling and the sense that you get when you look at pictures of her. You can feel something, and I do. And when you see her in the short bit of interview, and when you see her, I probably shouldn't even talk about it, being arrested, but there's pain in her face and distress, and it's like she's broken by, or being broken down. Not broken, I think she's very strong, I think, and she's being broken down bit by what are evil forces, because they're based in lies and they're based in complete lack of care about what is real and what isn't, because they're serving a purpose, and that's to protect the truth, to hide the truth of what really happened there at the hospital and why those deaths happened. And it just grows. So it starts off with those doctors, and then the whole machinery of it starts to get involved with the police, CPS, prosecutors, and the media. The media love these stories, they love them. It means money for them, it's about money. The media's input here is all about money, and they're still doing it, Money and kudos, and fake kudos, Like the two Daily Mail journalists, if you can call them that, who went to Wales and interviewed Dr. Evans, and it's not journalism at all. I don't know what it is. It's not journalism. And we have the aspect of, since the CPS said you're not supposed to talk about anything that would potentially undermine the retrial in 2024 of one particular case, then even the one journalist who actually said something about it just completely shut down and said, I can't talk about anything now for the next year. That's up to them. I know it's up to them, and fair play that they did try something, but it was done in a very sort of showboaty, grandstanding style, with an entrance saying, nobody's talking about this. I think it falls to me to do it. I wish somebody else would do it, as though no one else exists. And that typifies what that whole world is. They're in bubbles of their own. There's another journalist that's quite well known. I remember, and I used to follow her at one time on Twitter. Perhaps the names aren't important because they're sort of a type. I remember her doing a tweet about a month ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, where she said, part of the tweet I remember was about Lucy Letby. Said she's never protested her innocence. It was strange. Never protested the innocence. Madness, isn't it? That's the type of insanity. Or it's just willful. They're writing fictions in their heads about what they believe this person is, to the extent that right from the very beginning, what's the first protestation that Lucy Letby makes even before the police are involved? It's taking out the grievance process. It's saying, not only have I not done anything deliberately wrong, I've not done anything wrong at all. My practice hasn't been, my clinical practice isn't wanting, and I wasn't negligent, let alone anything to do with deliberate harm. It's not even a protestation, it's an insistence on being treated fairly and decently and reasonably, and at that time, for a certain amount of time, the management did do that, and they apologised to her on behalf of the trust, and they got those 4 consultants to apologise to her. One of them in person did it in mediation, and they got them all to write to her with an apology. That's somebody saying, I've done nothing wrong, and that's right, she had done nothing wrong. And she'd been bullied, and she stood up against them further, and that's when they got really mad. So you've got this journalist saying, and then you look at all through the many hours of police interviews, all the charges, all the accusations that were put to her over those interviews. There would be hundreds and hundreds of individual instances where she said, no, I didn't do that, no, I didn't harm them, I didn't harm that babe, I didn't harm this one, didn't harm that one. Hundreds and hundreds of times. And then she pleads innocent. She pleads not guilty. She holds to the truth of her innocence. She pleads not guilty. And then through a very, very lengthy trial, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions from the prosecutor and their assistant saying, did you do this? Oh, we feel you did this. We know you did this. And it's no. Each one is a protestation of innocence. And you've got this journalist who's got a lot of followers. I'll just say what she said. She never protested her innocence. It was strange. Well, what is actually strange is that you, that journalist, can say that. Absolutely diametrically opposed to the truth to such a degree. There's a dark, sinister absurdity to it. It's absurd. It's as though the more someone fought to protect themselves, fought to protect their honour and their good name, to the extent that when she was in the mediation with Jayaram, it wasn't a matter of, she wanted to know that he thought well of her still, even though after the bullying, that she wanted to know that they believed in her as a nurse, as a professional. She's trained to do this job and she's done it well. She wanted to know, she wanted the assurance that he thought well of her. Her question to him was, supplementary one was, but will you be happy to work with me? Not just will you work with me? And he sidesteps it and says, because we know this, we know his perspective on that conversation, so I should say that's what I'm basing it on. He says, he reports in the interview afterwards that he did say, well, if you're on shift, I'll work with you. So he wouldn't. And he said, didn't say he was happy because he wasn't. But that is not about him. It's not about him. It's about Lucy Letby and her need to be honoured, you know, that her hard work and skills and care is honoured and believed in. It goes beyond protesting innocence. It's embodying it. It's embodying honour. It's embodying the truth of who you feel to be, and when you're misjudged, how you would react to that. She's come from a family where obviously the parents that believe in her so much, and that her father helps her through that mediation process, or that grievance process, as he should, because he cares about his daughter. And you see some YouTubers and other people saying, oh, well, she got her father to help. What's that about? That's what people who love each other do. They try to help each other in families. Who else are you going to turn to? Nobody? Nobody? Does she have to be all on her own, does she? Would that make you feel better? If her parents didn't believe in her, would that make you feel better? Of course they believed in her, because they know her, as her friends know her. So yeah, as to the actual public opinion part of it, is that in the horror story headlines, in the shock headlines, people just end up in so many ways. Just, if you'd ask many people, and I've seen it on Twitter hundreds of times, you know, they get just such basic things wrong. You know, they'll say, oh well, she killed 2 children with insulin. So they'll get such basic things wrong because it's the story again, like what they used to call Chinese whispers. I don't know if that's politically correct to say now, but anyway, you know, the principle is that they hear it and then it changes again. So for this journalist, so-called, who's apparently done a degree in journalism, and ends up, after it being absolutely apparent to anyone, someone's stood by and made it very clear that they're not guilty, thousands of times in effect, through the questioning process, the trial process, and somebody can say, well, you didn't protest your innocence. Well, you could infer what they want is that somebody to be in the dock screaming and tearing their hair out and weeping and gnashing their teeth. That's what they want. They want performance. And that goes back to the thing about the trial, is that it's turned into this dark theatre. And what they want from someone who's simply honest is a bigger performance. They want them to perform, because they're in that world of being on television and doing interviews and on the radio, and they want a performer that they can believe in, because they want the drama of it, because they're hooked on the drama of it. And that's the angle from the mainstream media. It doesn't matter about the truth of anything. They're not interested in looking at any of the details that the people like Dr. McLachlan and Science on Trial, Sarita Adams, Peter Elston, Richard Gill, so many others, all the commenters here, all the commenters on Twitter, all the conversations being had here in comments and on Twitter, etc. And on all the other websites that I've mentioned, those people. The people in the media, they just want drama. They don't care about... Think of the case when there was that murder in Bristol. I won't mention the gentleman's name because he was just completely monstered by the police, by the mainstream media, and they wanted him. They, in very quick order, very short order, they painted him as in such a terrible way, and he won a huge amount of money suing them, which is great. It wasn't enough money. It wasn't enough money. It should have bankrupted them. So yeah, that's what they want. They're after drama. They're living in a fictional world. They're not living in an analytical world. So when you get the journalists from the Daily Mail who've just won a big award, apparently, well, it's like this little glass thing, you know. But they're all being slapped on the back for it, the 2 journalists from the Daily Mail, for their podcast. Like I said last night, when they go to his home, Evans, and he says to them, oh, well, I'm looking at these 2 extra cases of insulin poisoning, but there's no insulin records. We don't know the levels. It doesn't and wouldn't and even can't occur to them for them to say, even to go, oh, all right, that's interesting. So what makes you concerned and suspicious then? I mean, if you don't even know the levels. Because it's an unreal world. Evans is an unreal person, actually. He's living this dark fiction in his head that he's pushed into the world for his own arrogant, selfish reasons, venal reasons, to play this role as a finder of witches, as a witch finder. And it's nothing new under the sun. All that was going on hundreds of years ago. And the media now, with all its stories and all its experts coming on, I can't bear to watch any of them. I've seen little bits. Sorry about the sniffing. Calm down. I see little bits, and they wheel out psychologist after psychologist with this absolute drivel coming out of their mouths. And there's channels that I used to watch on YouTube. Some of them I was quite interested in because of the cases they covered, but there was one that I just won't watch them anymore about anything. It's not a case of they have to agree with me. It's not about that. It's just I've realised what they are. They don't care about the truth. They're interested in, like with the mainstream media, these channels it's about making money. It's about making money. If they thought that looking into the case and challenging the conviction would make them more money, that's what they'd be doing. That's what they'd be doing then, if it could make them more money. So this is amoral. There's no moral world there for them. But it's dressed up sometimes in psychobabble or, oh, I attended the whole trial, therefore I've got this special insight. But what's lacking is any critical thinking. Either the minutiae of it, or even from a long shot, considering the whole system about how this has worked. No sense of perspective about other cases where there's been obvious miscarriages of justice and ones that are ongoing now, coming up to potential appeals or actual appeals, as in Colin Norris and Ben Geen, and I thought for some of these sections, I've got to do research. I've got to collect a whole bunch of their, and I've got a folder with links into probably about 250 news stories, most of which I've sort of scanned, many of which I've read in total and taken notes from. But I'm not here to sort of replicate them. We're not here to do that because it should be just fish and chip paper, If they don't do that anymore, I know, but they used to. Fish and chip paper. But when it's on the televisions, when it's on I don't have a television, but when it's on, I watch little bits of videos and I've watched some of the interviews, of course, and it's just to repeat the horror, get the horror out there, get the eyeballs on there. It's what's the driver for that? It's money again. It's money. Money makes them want to tell that story rather than a different story, and the different story is, hold on a minute, this doesn't feel right. And they act as a pack generally in probably all, and that's the moribund and deathly state British journalism, and probably most journalism across the world is in. There's very few, vanishingly few individuals anymore in it, because money again, because their position. And there was another one, John Sweeney, said, he did this tweet. He said something like, it's going to upset all the good people I know, but I've got concerns about it. And he never heard from him again. They test the waters. They don't want any pushback. And the other guy did an article on it, just test the waters a little bit. Kind of wants to be the contrarian, but only to a certain extent. This isn't to say that it's just typifying what they are, and with very few exceptions, and the exceptions prove the rule. Someone like Craig Murray, in respect of Julian Assange, he's the exception that proves the rule about journalists, by and large. And yeah, so it filters down to the so-called alternative media and YouTubers that are just looking for a bit of to get, you know, eyeballs on their channels and likes and subscriptions and extra, I don't know, whatever as they do to raise money, to make it a money. I'm not knocking the idea of making money out of YouTube at all, but per se. But I'm just saying that's the driver for it. That's the driver that the guy who does so much about this just pulled out an 11-hour thing the other day. I was sent a link to it. I mean, I won't be spending 11 hours on that, funnily enough. That's the kind of environment where you got comments coming into those videos that he does that say things like, oh, Lucy Letby bought the house near a cemetery. What do you think about that? Sickness. It pulls in all the sickness. It collates it, and the unreality. But, and I've got to say this, I think, is that they enjoy it. It would disappoint them. They want her to be guilty, whether she is or not. It would greatly disappoint them, and it would greatly disappoint all the mainstream media outlets that have essentially made money out of the story. That there might be, you know, it would disappoint them. They want the serial killer nurse is what they want, and they mean to have it forever. And then they'll go back and do it and do another video. Well, the whole thing about, I keep forgetting to mention this, the whole Netflix thing or whatever. And there's this thing about whether the police sold the rights or something like that. I don't know what that means. I don't, and they denied it, or they just said it's not so much rights. It's about the idea about who they'll work with, some kind of exclusivity package. But it's all goes back to money. It all goes back to status. It all goes back to bigging themselves up. It all goes back to ego, and it's nothing to do with the rights and wrongs, the truth and the falsity of what's happened here to Lucy Letby, but also obviously inextricably linked to those babies. What was their experience? The media, the mainstream media, so many of these YouTube, they don't care. They don't give a damn what happened to those babies. They don't care. They want the story of what happened to them, that they can salivate over, that they can get juiced up over and enjoy it, because it appeals to their sadism. Their sadism to have someone to hate. In the same way that, you know, a few hundred years ago, when there was news in the towns and the villages of a witch being found and someone declared a witch, people would be salivating then. They're interested in it. You know, you'd have to... they'd be all ears about it. And then they'd find another one. And it would spread. So it's a very old thing. All this is very old. It's just different technologies taken over. I know everyone knows this. I'm not trying to teach anyone to suck eggs or anything like that. You know, not that I've ever sucked an egg, but it's all old stuff, isn't it? I'm just trying to say this like it's a conversation we're having, although it's only me speaking. But I do read as many comments as I can, and yeah. I was contacted by somebody. I won't say their name because what they've sent me is very interesting, and they've sent it elsewhere. It's a theory related to two of the babies, and it's a very interesting theory, and I think they're sending it to the legal team as is at the moment, and I'm only not mentioning it because they've asked me not to, but it just shows there are people looking into this from all angles, and I don't think that's going to stop. And Chris Clark has been working, did a video with his work on before. He's been looking at the working with a graphologist, American graphologist, into the Green Note, and I think the other note as well, but he's been tweeting about a lot of that. There's Chris J. Clark, Esquire, on Twitter. So I've been following that as well. And I was hoping, and I had hoped that... I just had to look up something. Yeah, I was hoping that Peter Hyatt, as he said, he had been working with what he said is a British team of statement analysts in respect of those notes, which are personal notes, but I haven't seen anything as yet. Perhaps they're still working on it. I look forward to hearing what their views are. The other aspect of the journalism is what was the reporting before the trial that the jury obviously saw en route. How did that affect them? I know, there's the real world, and then there's the world of saying, well, don't let anything you've ever read or heard about this affect you. But what reporting did they see? And the way it was reported, what's missing and what's there, what are the omissions? Did any of the reporting that they saw talk about the medical negligence claims that were in the offing at the same time, just before the police got involved? Did they talk about the sepsis problems in that hospital as a rule, that it was one of the worst hospitals in the country for sepsis control? Did they talk about that? Did they talk about the negligence claims ongoing? I mean, all the way up to when they joined the jury. What prior knowledge? How would the mainstream media set their minds? Actually, it is a very emotional story. Of course, it is. But but what parameters did they kind of set the minds of these would-be jurors, so that once they become jurors, that they can't think outside of that box because of the influence of mainstream media? I don't know. And now we've got this absurd situation where you've got the judge saying, oh, don't say anything about anything, and the CPS saying, oh, don't say anything about this case, and putting a chill on the idea of people talking about it. Although that's not working, people are still talking about it, thank goodness. Their concerns. At the same time that the media keep churning out more things, and somebody's working on some kind of Netflix or whatever it is, or the documentaries, the Panorama one, and they're working on these, 3-4 part documentaries about it to, again, supplant a real person who's innocent with a fictional character of their imaginations. Which is not a new thing for them to do, because what they're actually doing, essentially, is a replication of what the consultants did way back from 2015 onwards. They created a figment of a person, and they went after that person and didn't care about the actual person in front of them. And then Evans did the same, and the police did the same, and the CPS did the same, and the prosecutor did the same. And then the jury is just receiving all that in the trial without, as I said with the trial one, without having the defence show them through a powerful representation of medical experts the alternative stories about what happened to those babies. Tell that story, what happened to the babies. And then when you tell that story, the idea of Lucy Letby being anything to do with that melts away. She's innocent in and of herself, but also by virtue of telling the story of what happened to those babies. The disease process that they were undergoing, and the stresses, and the doctor failures that they were going, and the periods without water, and the periods without antibiotics. And the chest drain put in the wrong place, and the butterfly needle left in the chest, and possibly the wrong medication given in certain instances. What about all that? That's the story. That's the story which then becomes the story, and that's why I've done it in this sequence. That's the story about the hospital. and that neonatal ward, and the culture of the NHS, and the failures within that unit, and the consultant failures and the doctor failures primarily, and the systemic failures and the failures to address or even look at or even consider the idea that they had a major pathogen problem over that period of time. So they preferred, for different reasons, or different, no, it's still about money. This all ties back into the follow the money video. That's where we come to. The story about the serial killer saves certain people and certain organisations a hell of a lot of money, and saves them status, and saves them being charged with medical negligence, saves all that. And it also makes a lot of money, including for these media outlets, in all sorts of ways, all little ego trips for them. I think that's it, I don't know, just some bits, whether this comes through the dross of the police operation, the dross of what Operation Hummingbird was, Think of this. Lucy comes back from a holiday, sends a text, I think it was a text or WhatsApp, it's an electronic communication saying, I'll come back with a bang. And then the police get hold of that, this, some kind of analyst, some pretend job, pseudo pretend job analyst says, she said, I'm coming back with a bang. That means she's telegraphing and saying she's going to be doing this, and that's why she ends up doing it. And then the papers get, she said she was going to come back with a bang. How absurd is that? How bizarre and weird and absurd is that? That you'd think somebody would advertise that they're going to... It's just insane. It's insane. It's on the same level as sort of complete thought disconnection as that journalist who said, I'll say it again, that what she said, she never protested her innocence. It was strange. When people are in that kind of mindset, so divorced from the reality, they're in this fictional world, and that's in a fictional world like that, they can just do horrors and support horrors, while at the same time pretending to be professionals. They can prop up horrors because they're not seeing a real person, and they're not thinking about the real babies, and they're not thinking about the real nurse, they're not thinking about that real unit, and they're not thinking about the other potentials for what happened to those babies. None of their concern. It's just about the story, and not a factual story. Just the best fiction that they can construct. Anyway, hope I haven't gone on too much. That's it. Part 8 of Lucy Letby, a different story. A different story, which is, you look at Dr. Scott's work, and he'll tell that's why most of the articles are like a story. It's the journey, the story, the narrative of the baby's experience in that hospital from birth, or when they arrive in that unit. That's the story. That's the different story, and there are many of them. And Lucy Letby has a different story, and that's the one which is a million miles away from anything you've read in mainstream media. It's the antithesis of everything they say, and all the lies they project, all the poison they project, which is really coming out of their own dark, incestuous, vicious hearts, empty hearts, and they project it onto an innocent person. Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.